There are places across America that exist for one reason and disappear for the exact same reason. Places born not from rivers, gold, or politics, but from asphalt, gasoline, headlights, and endless miles of road. Glenrio was one of those places. A town created by a journey. A town kept alive by travelers. A town whose heartbeat was the sound of engines, laughter from roadside diners, open motel doors, and families heading west chasing their American dream. And one day, that sound stopped. Glenrio sits on the border between Texas and New Mexico, right where endless plains meet endless sky. Today, when you stand there, you hear the wind. You see empty buildings. You feel silence. But there was a time when this small town was full of life, voices, music, and energy. Its story begins in the early 1900s, before the glory days of Route 66, back when railroads and dirt roads shaped small-town fate. People settled there because it was a stop, a pause, a place between places, a place where travelers needed to rest, where trains needed to slow, where people needed something familiar in the middle of nowhere. And then came 1926, the year when a road would change everything. A road that would become legend. A road that would shape American culture forever. Route 66, the Mother Road, the promise of mobility, a highway of hope across the American West. And Glenrio found itself right on it. Not near it, not close to it, right on it. And suddenly, this quiet border town wasn't quiet anymore. Cars rolled through constantly, families on vacations, soldiers going home after war, truck drivers carrying the nation's economy, dreamers chasing California's sunsets. And Glenrio welcomed every one of them. Gas stations pumped life into engines and money into the town. Restaurants served food to strangers who became part of the town's story. Motels lit their signs each night, promising a safe place to sleep in the middle of nowhere. Glenrio wasn't a big city. It didn't have skyscrapers, government buildings, or fame, but it had something more powerful: purpose. It mattered because it existed exactly where people needed it. By the 1940s and 1950s, Glenrio was living its best years. A classic Route 66 American roadside town. Imagine it. Neon signs glowing at night. Cars lined up outside diners. Families stretching after long drives. Music playing from jukeboxes. Conversations floating in warm desert air. Owners greeting customers like family. This wasn't just a stop. This was life. This was identity. This was Glenrio. But American progress is complicated. Sometimes it builds. Sometimes it erases. And while Glenrio thrived under Route 66, forces were already moving that would decide a different future. A future where speed mattered more than community. Efficiency became more valuable than small towns. And the new dream was not to stop, but to never stop at all. Soon, a decision would be made. A decision that would take everything Glenrio depended on, every car, every traveler, every reason to exist, and send it somewhere else. A decision that would turn a living town into silence. And when it came, it would happen almost overnight. For towns like Glenrio, Route 66 wasn't just a highway. It was a lifeline, a river of people, stories, dreams, worries, laughter, and hope constantly moving through the desert. Cars flowed like water, and Glenrio stood right on the bank of that river. By the 1940s and 1950s, Glenrio was alive in a way only a Route 66 town could be. This wasn't a place you sped through. This was a place you experienced. Drivers would see the signs long before they reached it. Bright paint, bold words, promises of cold drinks, good food, friendly service, clean beds, fresh gas. And then, headlights would appear at night, slicing through the darkness. Engines would slow, tires would roll across gravel, car doors would open, and another piece of someone's life would step into Glenrio. Families traveling west to California to start over. Young couples chasing adventure. Soldiers coming home, finally breathing free highway air again. Truck drivers who knew every bump of Route 66 by heart. For each of them, Glenrio was a break from the road, but also something deeper. A moment of humanity in the middle of miles of emptiness. There were gas stations with friendly attendants who didn't just fill your tank, they talked to you. They asked where you were headed. They made jokes. They offered advice about the road ahead. There were small cafes and diners, the kind you can only find in places like this, with worn counters polished by countless elbows, with home-cooked meals that tasted better than they needed to. Because when you've been on the road for hours, even simple food feels like love. There were motels where neon lights buzzed gently in the warm night. Rooms that weren't luxurious, but they were safe, comfortable, human. Places where people slept deeply, listening not to city noise, but to the calm desert wind. And behind all of that, there were locals, real people, hardworking, proud, people who didn't just make a living from Route 66. They lived because of it. They ran the gas pumps, cooked the meals, washed the sheets, cleaned the rooms, opened the stores, repaired cars, and talked to strangers every single day. They knew that every traveler crossing Glenrio needed something. Fuel, food, rest, a moment to breathe. And for decades, Glenrio gave exactly that. Children grew up watching endless streams of cars pass by. People measured time not just by clocks, but by traffic. Morning rush, midday lull, evening glow of headlights, late night wanderers. Every day was different. Every day was the same. And it was beautiful in its own quiet way. Glenrio was small, but it mattered. It didn't have government power. It didn't control economies. It didn't appear in political speeches. But to everyone who stopped there, it meant something. A memory, a warm moment, a safe stop in the middle of a long journey. And to the people who lived there, Glenrio wasn't a stop. It was home, a community where everyone knew everyone, where life moved slower, where kids played under the huge western sky, where evenings were calm and peaceful, while cities grew louder, bigger, and faster. Glenrio held onto something rare, simplicity. But while Glenrio enjoyed its golden years, the world beyond it was changing. America was speeding up. The country wanted to move farther, faster, more efficiently. The idea of travel was changing. Convenience was being redesigned. Powerful people were planning something massive. A new interstate highway system. A system designed not for community, but for speed. Roads that would cut across states in straight, perfect lines. Roads that would be faster, safer, more direct. Roads that would skip small towns completely, including Glenrio. The mother road that had given life to places like Glenrio was about to be replaced. And when that happened, everything Glenrio depended on, every car, every traveler, every stop, every dollar, every reason to exist, would disappear. The people living there couldn't know exactly when. They couldn't see the exact day their world would end, but they could feel something coming, a quiet shadow stretching across the horizon. Something was going to change, something that no gas station, diner, or motel sign could fight against. Not a storm, not a war, not poverty, progress. And Glenrio, like so many other Route 66 towns, would soon learn what it feels like when the world simply drives past you and never looks back. Progress rarely asks permission. It doesn't gently knock on the door of small towns and explain what's about to happen. It doesn't sit down with families and ask how they feel. It doesn't apologize afterward. Progress simply arrives, and whatever stands in its way is forced to deal with the consequences. For Glenrio, that progress was the interstate highway system. In the mid-1950s, America began building something extraordinary, a vast network of high-speed highways designed to connect the country more efficiently than ever before. Straight lines across valleys, bridges across rivers, roads that ignored the old wandering paths of history. It was an engineering marvel, a political triumph, a new era of American travel. But for towns like Glenrio, it was a death sentence written in concrete. Because the logic was simple, why let drivers wind through dozens of small towns when they could stay on a straight, fast, modern highway instead? Route 66 had once been the greatest road in America, and now it was being replaced. For Glenrio, the key decision came when planners determined the route of Interstate 40, the new high-speed highway that would run through the same region. They looked at Glenrio. They looked at maps. They looked at efficiency charts. They looked at construction costs. And they made a decision. A small one on paper, a massive one in real life. Interstate 40 would not pass through Glenrio. It would go around it, just a short distance away, close enough to see, close enough to hear the faint, distant traffic, but too far for drivers to stop here, too far for Glenrio to survive. In a single moment, a pen stroke separated Glenrio from its lifeline. The steady stream of cars that had sustained it for decades would soon disappear. People in the town heard the news. Some didn't believe it at first. Some hoped maybe the planners would change their minds. Some told themselves it won't be that bad. But those who understood highways, those who had seen other towns abandoned, knew exactly what was coming. Because when a town exists for travelers, and travelers stop coming, the town doesn't just struggle, it dies. And as construction began, reality became impossible to ignore. Massive machinery carved a new scar across the landscape. Concrete poured, bridges rose, signs went up. Signs that once would have pointed toward Glenrio, now pointed straight past it. People stood at the edge of town and watched it happen. They watched a future unfold where Glenrio was no longer a destination, but a forgotten exit that didn't exist. Business owners tried to stay optimistic. Gas station owners wondered if maybe drivers would still come just to see. Motel owners hoped nostalgia might save them. Cafe owners prayed that travelers would still need a place like theirs. But everyone knew the truth. You don't stop when you don't have to. And soon, people wouldn't have to anymore. The last months before the interstate opened were strange. Traffic still moved along Route 66. Cars still stopped. Life still went on. But there was a shadow over everything. A sense of waiting, like a town standing beside a hospital bed, listening to the slowing heartbeat of someone they love. And then, it happened. The new interstate opened. Drivers shifted routes. Navigation guides changed. Maps were updated. And traffic disappeared almost overnight. The endless flow of cars that once defined Glenrio simply stopped. Gas stations stood empty. Restaurant doors opened and no one walked in. Motel neon signs glowed into the darkness with no one to see them. Silence replaced engines. Stillness replaced movement. A town built for travelers was now staring at empty roads. There was no celebration, no dramatic explosion, no headline in the news, just the slow, crushing realization. The world had decided it no longer needed Glenrio. And for a town whose purpose was to serve the road, there is nothing more devastating than when the road leaves you behind. Town death is rarely loud. It isn't an explosion. It isn't chaos. It isn't a sudden collapse. It's quieter than that. A slow fading, a gradual dimming, a long, painful exhale that never turns into an inhale again. After Interstate 40 opened and the traffic disappeared, Glenrio didn't die in one day. But its last days had begun. The changes were subtle at first. A business owner noticed that yesterday fewer cars passed than the day before. A motel clerk realized no one had checked in for 3 nights in a row. A restaurant owner threw away food that never got ordered. A gas pump stood still, its numbers no longer moving. Life that had been repetitive and predictable for decades was becoming uncertain and then frightening. People waited. They waited for a weekend rush that never came. They waited for summer vacations that no longer passed through. They waited for one big travel season that might save everything. It didn't come. The town that had once pulsed with engines, voices, laughter, arguments, greetings, children crying in back seats, radios playing, and the sound of America moving forward. Now, listen to something new. Silence. Businesses tried to hold on. Gas stations stayed open as long as they could. Owners would sit inside, watching empty roads, hoping that at least one car would pull in. Restaurant lights still turned on in the evening. Kitchen smells still filled the air. Coffee still brewed in the morning. Plates still waited to be used. But no one came. Motels kept their rooms ready. Sheets folded, keys hanging neatly on hooks. Neon signs glowing defiantly into the desert night. Like lighthouses shining into an ocean where no ships would ever sail again. There is something heartbreaking about effort that no longer matters. About work that has no purpose. About hope that slowly realizes it has nowhere left to stand. People tried to stay strong. They told each other it might get better. They repeated optimistic sentences not because they believed them, but because they needed to hear something other than despair. But eventually, reality forces honesty. Someone closes their doors temporarily, then permanently. A for sale sign appears. No one buys. A building is locked for the last time. No one returns. Families start leaving. Some because they have no money left. Some because they need jobs to survive. Some because they can't watch their home slowly vanish. Those departures were some of the hardest moments. People who had spent their whole lives here stood in their living rooms, surrounded by boxes, listening to the empty quiet of a town that no longer had space for their future. They walked through memories, hallways where children once ran, yards where they once laughed, streets where everyone once knew their name. And they realized that this place, which had always felt permanent, wasn't. Neighbors hugged neighbors. Promises were made to visit. Tears were held back, and sometimes not. And then engines started again. But this time, not as part of Glenrio's life. This time, as a farewell. Cars rolled out of town one by one. Trucks pulled away with the last belongings of families who had built their lives here. Doors closed behind them, and more silence filled the empty spaces they left behind. Slowly, the things that make a town disappeared. Businesses shut down. Schools closed. Jobs vanished. Routines ended. Streetlights stayed, but stood over empty roads. Buildings remained, but became shells. Signs stayed up, but pointed to nothing. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was just sad. A quiet kind of sadness that settles into wood, brick, dust, and memory. A sadness that lingers in the air long after people are gone. By the time most residents left, Glenrio wasn't really a town anymore. It was a place made of leftovers. Leftover buildings, leftover memories, leftover dreams. A place that once existed for movement, now trapped in stillness. And eventually, there came a day when Glenrio wasn't dying anymore. It was simply gone. Not erased from the map, not demolished into nothing, but gone in the way that truly matters. Gone for daily life, gone from relevance, gone from the hearts of most of the world, except for the people who once lived there, and the road that had once given Glenrio life, now roared far away, too far to save it, close enough to remind it what used to be when the last families leave, when the final business closes, when the final door locks for the last time. What happens to a town? What happens to a place built for life when there is no life left in it? For Glenrio, there was no dramatic ending, no final ceremony, no official announcement declaring the town dead. It simply transitioned from present to past, from a living community to a memory holding on a land. And as years passed, Glenrio began to change again. Nature noticed the silence first. Grass crept across old parking lots. Wind carried dust through open doorways. Sunlight faded signs that once screamed for attention. Wood cracked, paint peeled, metal rusted. Foundations settled into tired earth. Buildings didn't collapse immediately. They lingered, standing there like tired guardians of a history no one was around to tell. Quiet witnesses to what used to be. Some sat frozen in time. Old motels still holding their shapes, even if their windows were gone. Gas stations still with their canopies, even if fuel hadn't flowed in years. Restaurants with counters that would never again feel the weight of a forearm, a cup of coffee, or a plate of breakfast. Inside some buildings, if you look closely, you can almost feel life that once existed. You imagine conversations. You hear faint echoes of laughter. You picture headlights pulling in late at night. You sense the comfort this place once gave travelers. And you realize something powerful. Places remember, even when people don't. Glenrio didn't disappear completely. It became something else. A ghost town. A preserved fragment of a chapter in American history where highways shaped destinies. A reminder of a time when Route 66 defined movement, hope, escape, adventure, and freedom. Today, when people visit Glenrio, they don't come for fuel, food, or rest anymore. They come for something different. They come for connection. Connection to history. Connection to nostalgia. Connection to a version of America that feels simpler, slower, more human. Visitors stand where cars once lined up. They walk through empty rooms where voices once filled the air. They run their hands along decaying wood that once held life together. And somewhere between the silence and the wind, they feel something meaningful. They feel the weight of time. They feel how temporary everything really is. Glenrio is not just a story of failure. It is not simply a town that died. It is something more human and more honest. It is a story about dependence, about how places rely on purpose, and about what happens when that purpose disappears. It is also a story about progress and its cost. Highways like Interstate 40 made travel faster. They made transportation more efficient. They helped shape modern America. They were necessary, but they also erased hundreds of small towns, places full of lives, identities, families, and memories. And Glenrio is a reminder that progress always has a human side. Every closed business has a story. Every abandoned building once mattered to someone. Every silent town was once full of voices. Standing in Glenrio today, you can feel all of that. There is no traffic noise, no customers stepping into shops, no families checking into motels. Just open sky, wind, stillness, and a road in the distance. The road that replaced Glenrio. The road that took its future away. But even in its silence, Glenrio has something powerful left. It has meaning. It has the ability to teach. It shows us how fragile communities can be, how decisions made far away can reshape lives, how quickly a thriving place can become empty. And it reminds us of something else too, that we are always passing through something important. Every town, every place, every moment, they seem permanent until suddenly they're not. Glenrio may no longer be alive in the way it once was. But as long as people visit, remember, tell its story, as long as someone stands there and feels something, Glenrio is not truly gone. It lives in memory, in history, in the quiet wind moving through abandoned streets, in the lingering echo of Route 66, and in the simple truth that some places may fade from maps, but never fade from what they meant.